If you're hearing this recording, then I'm already dead. Or worse. My name is Sergeant Kaine Valerius, Imperial Guard, 10th Cadian Shock Troops, seconded to salvage inspection detail aboard the Righteous Endeavour. The date is 447.M41, though I'm no longer certain time functions the way it should aboard this vessel. If you're part of a recovery team considering boarding the derelict known as Eternal Providence, I'm begging you, don't. Seal the airlocks. Target the plasma drives. Send this ship into the nearest star. The smell hit me first, even through the rebreather. Copper and burnt sugar and something else, something that shouldn't exist in the void. And the sounds. The Emperor preserve me. The sounds that came through the hull before we even breached. Not groaning metal or failing systems, but something that sounded almost like singing. If songs could bleed. I should have known then, we all should have known. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, when we still thought this was routine. When I still believed the Emperor's light reached everywhere. The Eternal Providence had been missing for 3 standard months, when long-range augurs picked up her signature, drifting at the edge of the Tertius sector. A lunar-class cruiser, 5,000 crew complement, last reported en route from Forge World Griffon 4 to the naval station at Bacca. Valuable cargo, valuable ship. Command wanted her recovered, or at least her data cores extracted before some Xeno scavenger fleet claimed the prize. That's where we came in. Our Arvus lighter detached from the Righteous Endeavour at 0400 hours, ship time. I remember watching the derelict grow larger in the viewport, a dark silhouette against the stars that somehow seemed to swallow the light around it, rather than simply blocking it. She was intact, no visible battle damage, no breaches in the hull. That should have been our second warning. Ships don't just go silent in the void unless something catastrophic happens, and catastrophic leaves marks. Getting some strange readings on the heat signature, Sarge, said Tech Priest Ran from the pilot station, his augmented fingers dancing across the sensor array. Half his face was silver mechadendrites and data ports, the other half still human enough to frown. Localized hotspots throughout the ship, but they're moving. Could be plasma conduit failures, but the patterns are irregular, almost cyclical. Define cyclical, I said, checking my lasgun's charge pack for the 3rd time. Like breathing, Sergeant. Like the ship is breathing. Corporal Vex laughed, the sound harsh through the vox bead. Ships don't breathe, Priest. Your machine spirits are probably just confused after 3 months of nobody praying to them. He was young, Vex, 32 standard years, with a scar running through his left eyebrow from a greenskin's chopper on Armageddon. Good soldier, kept morale up. The kind of man who'd crack jokes in a trench while artillery screamed overhead. The kind of man who deserved to die better than he did. The others remained quiet. Specialist Mara Chen, our demolitions expert, checked her melter charges with mechanical precision. She'd lost her entire squad on Vrax, spent 2 years in the siege trenches. Didn't talk much, didn't need to. Sergeant Cross, 20-year veteran, scarred face, eyes that had seen too much. Navigator specialist Yuri Volkov, borrowed from the Endeavour's crew, necessary for checking the ship's warp systems. And Private Davin, fresh from the Schola, 17 standard years old, still believed the Emperor personally watched over the faithful. I envied him that certainty. Approaching starboard docking array, Ran announced. Airlocks appear functional. Automatic cycling system still operational. That's good news, right? Davin's voice cracked slightly. It means someone left power running to the essential systems, Cross said, his gravel voice carrying decades of experience. Question is why? Our lighter clamped onto the airlock with a magnetic thud that resonated through the hull. Standard procedure from here: pressure equalization, atmospheric testing, breach protocol. I'd done this 40 times in my career. Pirate vessels, derelict traders, ships damaged in warp translation. Routine. Boring even. Atmosphere on the other side is breathable, Ran reported, his mechadendrites interfacing directly with the airlock's machine spirit. Oxygen levels at 78% standard, nitrogen within acceptable parameters. Temperature elevated 34 degrees. No biological contaminants detected. No biological contaminants, Vex repeated. So nobody's rotting over there. That's something. I nodded, but something gnawed at my gut. The instinct that had kept me alive through the Damocles Crusade, through the Third War for Armageddon, through a dozen other campaigns where better soldiers had died screaming. That little voice that whispered when something was wrong. That voice was screaming now. Standard formation, I ordered, raising my voice to command register. Mara, cross, take point. Vex, Davin, center with the priest. Volkov and I will cover rear. Weapons hot, Vox open, nobody wanders off alone. And if anyone sees anything at all that doesn't scan right, you sing out immediately. Understood. A chorus of, "Yes, Sergeant," echoed back. The airlock cycled with a hiss of equalizing pressure. The inner door split open, revealing darkness punctured by emergency lighting that flickered in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, almost rhythmic, and that smell hit us. Even through the rebreathers, it penetrated. Copper and burnt sugar, and underneath it all, something else. Something organic and wrong, like spoiled meat left in summer heat, but colder somehow. A smell that bypassed the nose and went straight to the primitive hindbrain that remembered when humans were prey. Emperor's teeth, Vex muttered. What died in here? The first thing you noticed stepping aboard the Eternal Providence was the heat. It rolled over us in waves, far beyond what Ran's readings had suggested. Sweat immediately began soaking through my uniform, making the flak armor stick to my skin. The second thing was the silence. A ship this size should never be truly silent. There should be the hum of ventilation systems, the distant throb of plasma reactors, the background noise of 1,000 systems working in concert. This ship was silent the way tombs are silent. Our mag boots clanked against the deck plating as we moved deeper into the entry corridor. The emergency lighting cast everything in shades of red and black, creating shadows that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. The walls were standard Imperial construction, riveted adamantium plating covered in Gothic script declaring the Emperor's protection. Someone had scratched additional symbols between the prayers. Crude things, angular and wrong, that hurt to look at too long. Fresh, Cross said, running a gloved finger across one of the symbols. These were carved within the last few days. But the ship's been derelict for 3 months, Davin said, his voice pitching higher. That's not possible. Define possible, kid, Vex said, but his usual humor sounded forced. We found the first bodies 50 meters in what had been the ship's main assembly corridor. 6 crew members, or what had been crew members. They wore the standard uniforms of Imperial Navy ratings, but the uniforms were the only normal thing about them. Their bodies had been arranged in a perfect circle, arms outstretched toward the center, heads tilted back at angles that should have broken their necks. But it wasn't their positioning that made my breath catch. It was their faces, or rather, the absence of them. Smooth expanses of skin where eyes, nose, mouth should have been. Not cut away or burned off. Just absent, as if they'd been born that way. Throne above, Mara whispered, her first words since boarding. Ran approached the nearest body, his auspex clicking and whirring. No wounds evident, no signs of struggle or decomposition. Body temperature elevated significantly above ambient, suggesting recent death. But he trailed off, his human eye widening. while his augmented one whirred, refocusing. "But what, priest?" I demanded. "According to my readings, Sergeant, these bodies are still alive." The temperature spiked another 10 degrees. Somewhere in the distance, metal groaned, but it didn't sound like settling. It sounded like something large shifting its weight. "I don't like this," Davin said, and nobody argued with him. We moved past the bodies, giving them a wide berth. The corridor should have been straight, a simple thoroughfare running the length of the ship's starboard section. But somehow, it seemed to curve when I wasn't looking directly at it. The angles were wrong. Not obviously, not enough to point to and say, "That's impossible," but enough to make my eyes hurt, to make my balance feel slightly off. Vex noticed it too. Is it just me, or are the walls closer together than they should be? He was right. Standard Imperial corridors were built to specific dimensions to allow for troop movement and equipment transport. This corridor was shrinking, or we were growing, or space itself was becoming negotiable. "Just you," I lied, because someone needed to pretend this was all normal. "Probably just the heat affecting your vision." "Right," Vex said, not believing me for a second. "Just the heat." That's when he tried to lighten the mood, tried to be the Corporal Vex who kept everyone's spirits up. "You know what this reminds me of? This posting I had on Mordia, guarding a Prometheum refinery. Place smelled like this, all chemical and wrong. Turned out someone had been dumping corpse starch into the processors to cut costs. Smelled terrible, but at least corpse starch doesn't rearrange geometry." Nobody laughed. Even Vex's voice had an edge to it now, the forced casualness of a man trying not to panic. We reached the first junction, where corridors branched toward the bridge, engineering, and crew quarters. The lights here had failed completely, and our lumen beams cut through darkness that seemed almost physical, as if it resisted being illuminated. "Command, this is boarding Team Alpha." I spoke into the Vox. "We are 60 meters into the ship, proceeding toward the bridge. No survivors located yet. Multiple casualties, circumstances unclear. How copy?" Static answered me. Then beneath the static, something else. Not words, but almost like words. A rhythm that suggested language without being language. "Command, please respond." I tried again. More static, more of that sound underneath. "Interference," Mara suggested. "From what?" Cross's eyes scanned the shadows. Ship's been dead for months. No active systems that could generate that kind of disruption. Hour 6 came and went without fanfare, marked only by the chronometer in my helmet display. We'd made it to one of the ship's secondary control stations, a junction room where data access ports offered connection to the ship's core cogitators. Ran jacked himself in directly, his eyes glazing over as his consciousness merged with the machine spirit. Or what was left of the machine spirit. "Accessing ship's logs now," he reported, his voice distant, dreamy. "Last official entry was 93 days ago. Captain Marcos Telvan reporting Emperor's Mercy, reporting warp translation complications, Gellar Field fluctuations, multiple breaches into... I can't read this section. The data is corrupted, not by damage, Sergeant, by something that was recorded, as if the information itself is wrong." "Show me," I ordered. The data slate screen flickered to life, displaying the captain's final log entry. I'd read thousands of logs in my career. This one made my teeth ache. Day 93 aboard Eternal Providence. Warp translation to Baka delayed. Gellar Field generator experiencing intermittent failures. Chief engineer reports strange readings from the warp envelope. Says the measurements don't match any known warp phenomenon. Says the numbers form patterns. Says the patterns are beautiful. I've ordered him confined to quarters. 3 crew reported missing this morning. Security found them in the observation dome. staring at the warp. They won't stop screaming, even when we sedate them. They scream in perfect harmony. My first officer says we should abort translation, return to real space immediately. But every time we try, the Gellar Field destabilizes further. It's as if something wants us to stay. The navigator says she can see things in the warp, things that see her back, things that are. The log ended there, mid-sentence. The timestamp showed it had been recorded at 03:47 hours, ship time, 3 months ago. "There's more," Ran said, his voice strained. "Personal logs from crew members, hundreds of them, all ending the same way, all ending with..." He never finished the sentence. His body went rigid, every mechadendrite snapping straight like the quills of a threatened creature. Code cant poured from his lips, but wrong, inverted. The sacred language of the Mechanicus twisted into something that sounded like prayer and blasphemy combined. Then he unplugged himself, gasping, his human eye weeping tears of blood. "What did you see?" Cross demanded. "We need to leave," Ran whispered. "We need to leave now. The ship isn't dead. It's transformed. The Gellar Field didn't fail. It inverted. For 3 months, this ship has been existing simultaneously in real space and the warp. The crew didn't die. They evolved." Movement flickered in my peripheral vision. Just at the edge of the lumen beam's range, something shifted. When I turned to look directly at it, nothing was there. But the shadow it had cast remained, somehow existing independently of any object to create it. "We stick to the plan," I said, trying to inject confidence I didn't feel into my voice. "Splitting up is textbook stupid, but we don't have a choice. This ship is too large to clear as one unit, and command needs intel. Cross, take Mara and Davin to the bridge. See if you can access primary logs and power systems. Vex, Volkov, you're with me to engineering. We need to check the Gellar Field generator, confirm Ran's readings. Ran, you stay here, maintain Vox relay station." "Sergeant, I really think..." Davin started. "You think what I tell you to think, Private." I cut him off, harsher than I intended. "Vox check every 5 minutes. Anything unusual, you report immediately. Anything. A strange smell, a weird shadow, a feeling in your gut. I don't care if it sounds crazy, you report it." They nodded, even Davin, though his face had gone pale under the lumen lights. We split up at the junction. Cross's team headed toward the bow, toward the bridge where Captain's command and destiny is plotted. My team headed aft, down toward the ship's heart, where ancient reactors burn with caged stars and the barrier between reality and nightmare is measured in electromagnetic fields. The corridor stretched ahead of us, longer than it should have been. The ship had been 500 meters from bow to stern according to the schematics. We'd already walked 300 meters just getting to this section. "Vox check," I said into the comm. "Cross, report." Static answered. Then Cross's voice, distorted but recognizable. "Team 2 proceeding to bridge, no contact. Visibility poor. Seeing some structural anomalies but nothing impassable. Will report in 5. Acknowledged. Stay sharp." Vex walked beside me, his lasgun raised, his usual humor completely absent now. Volkov brought up the rear, his navigator's third eye concealed beneath its cloth wrapping, but I could see it moving underneath, tracking things none of us could perceive. "Mr. Volkov," I said quietly, "what do your special senses tell you about this place?" The navigator was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. "You know what the warp looks like, Sergeant. It's chaos. Impossible colors, mad geometries. The raw stuff of emotion and thought made almost physical. But there are currents in it. Patterns. The Astronomicon cuts through it like a lighthouse beam. The Gellar Field holds it at bay like a shield. And here? Here, the shield isn't holding anything at bay, Sergeant. It's holding something in, containing it, cultivating it. We reached the engineering deck access, a massive blast door designed to contain plasma core breaches. It was sealed, but the locking mechanism was active, glowing green. Why would the engineering deck be sealed from the outside? Vex asked. To keep something from getting out, I said, my finger hovering over the door control. Or to keep something from getting in. I pressed the control. The door split open with a hiss of equalizing pressure. That's when I heard Vex screaming over the Vox. Not the Vex standing next to me, weapon raised and breath steady. The other Vex. The one who had gone with Cross's team. The one who was currently shrieking in a voice that contained more than one throat, more than one vocal cord, more than one species should possess. And then the Vex standing next to me smiled, and his eyes were the wrong color, and I realized with crystal clarity that we had made a terrible mistake. We'd split up, exactly as something wanted us to. Chapter 2, Hour 6 to 12. The Descent. The Vex standing next to me wasn't Vex anymore. I knew it in the same instant I heard the real Vex screaming through the Vox, his voice raw with terror and something else, something wet and tearing. The thing wearing Vex's face continued smiling at me, and that smile was all wrong. Too wide, too many teeth. Teeth at angles that shouldn't exist in a human mouth. Sergeant, it said in Vex's voice, but underneath I heard other voices, dozens of them, speaking in unison. Don't you want to see what we've become? I didn't think. 20 years of combat drilled into muscle memory took over. My laser gun came up, the hotshot charge pack whining as it primed, and I put 3 rounds through the thing's center mass at point-blank range. The las bolts punched through it in flashes of superheated light and cauterized flesh. It staggered backward, still smiling, looking down at the smoking holes in its chest with what seemed like mild curiosity. Rude, it said, and lunged. Volkov grabbed my arm, yanking me sideways with navigator-augmented strength. Run! It's not alone. He was right. Shapes were detaching from the shadows behind us, moving with joints that bent in too many directions. I caught a glimpse of crew uniforms, of faces that had been human once, of hands that had grown too many fingers. We ran. Cross! I shouted into the Vox while our boots hammered against deck plating. Cross! Report! What's Vex's location? Static screamed back at me, then Cross's voice, strained and distant. Junction 7 Delta. Sergeant, he's Emperor's Mercy. He's still screaming, but his throat is... The Vox cut off with a wet sound that made my stomach clench. The corridor ahead of us wasn't the same corridor we'd walked through minutes before. The walls had changed, developing a texture that shouldn't exist on adamantium plating. Organic ridges pulsed with a rhythm that matched the ship's earlier breathing pattern. The metal itself seemed to have become porous, weeping a clear fluid that pooled on the deck and reflected light in colors that hurt to perceive. Behind us, footsteps. Too many footsteps. And under them, the wet sound of flesh sliding against metal. Junction 7 Delta is aft, near the port observation blister. Volkov panted, his third eye now uncovered and wide, seeing things in spectrums I couldn't. But Sergeant, the ship's geometry is wrong. The corridors are rearranging. What should be a straight line is now... I don't care if it's folded into a paper crane, I snarled. We find Vex. We find the others. Move. We rounded a corner and nearly collided with Ran. The tech priest stood in the center of the corridor, perfectly still, his mechadendrites hanging limp like dead snakes. His human eye was closed. but his augmented one blazed with light, projecting code cant across the walls in glowing script. "Run!" I grabbed his shoulder and immediately wished I hadn't. His skin was hot, not warm, not feverish. Hot like metal fresh from a forge, hot enough that I could feel it through my gloves. His head turned toward me with mechanical precision, but his movements were all wrong, as if his neck had developed additional vertebrae. "Sergeant Valerius," he said in his normal voice, and that somehow made it worse. "I've been interfacing with the ship's machine spirit. It showed me such magnificent things. The Omnissiah's true form, the mathematics of transformation, the sacred geometry of flesh becoming data, becoming something more." "Snap out of it, priest." I shook him hard. "Whatever you saw in those systems, it's not real. It's corruption, warp taint." "Is it?" His augmented eye rotated, focusing on me with unnatural intensity. "How do you define corruption, Sergeant? Is it not simply evolution accelerated? The Mechanicus seeks the purity of the machine, to shed weak flesh for blessed steel. What I've witnessed is the next step. Flesh, machine, and warp unified. The sacred trinity of existence. The code cant on the walls was changing, the symbols shifting from Mechanicus scripture to something else. Something that predated human language. Something that should never be written down, because the act of recording it gave it power. Volkov was staring at the walls, his third eye tracking the flowing symbols. "We need to leave. Now. This isn't just chaos corruption. This is active transformation. The ship isn't contaminated. It's become a conduit, a doorway. Doorway to what? Does it matter?" The navigator's voice cracked. "Nothing good comes through doorways in the warp." Vex's screaming cut through the vox again, but it wasn't words anymore. It was a sound no human throat should produce. Harmonics layered on harmonics. A chorus of agony that somehow formed patterns. Musical patterns. A song. "Junction 7 Delta," I repeated, checking my auspex. The display flickered, showing impossible readings. According to the scanner, the junction was simultaneously 40 meters ahead and 200 meters behind us. "This way." We found him 3 corridors later, in a section where the emergency lighting had turned purple and the gravity had become negotiable. We found his helmet first. It floated at chest height, rotating slowly in the absence of gravity, the faceplate cracked but intact. Blood surrounded it in a perfect sphere, not dispersing the way blood should in 0G, but holding its shape like something alive, like something with surface tension that defied physics. Inside the blood sphere, things moved. Small things, pale things, swimming with purpose. His helmet came off, Volkov whispered, in a vacuum-rated section. The atmosphere should have vented. He should have died instantly. "Look at the walls," I said, my voice hollow. The corridor's surfaces had developed a membrane. A thin, translucent layer of tissue stretched across the adamantium plating, like skin over muscle. It pulsed with that same rhythmic breathing, and underneath I could see structures, veins, organs, things that had no name but served purposes I didn't want to imagine. The membrane was growing. As we watched, it spread another centimeter, another inch, consuming the Imperial prayers etched into the plating and replacing them with symbols that wrote themselves in real time. Not carved, not painted. Growing up from beneath the surface like bruises, forming in reverse. "The ship is alive," Ran said from behind us, and I spun to find him drifting closer, his mag boots deactivated, floating with arms spread like a prophet mid-sermon. "Don't you see? The machine spirit has transcended its metal prison. It has become flesh. It has become US. "Stay back," I warned, raising my laser gun. "Or what, Sergeant? You'll shoot me again?" He gestured to the not Vex we'd encountered earlier, I realized with crawling horror that it had followed us. It hung at the corridor's far end, watching with eyes that had multiplied across its face like tumors. Violence is such a limited response. There are better ways to communicate. Let me show you. Rahn's mechadendrites activated, but instead of their normal function, they began to writhe independently, each one taking on a life of its own. His robes tore as something moved underneath, as his flesh began to bulge and reconfigure. Get to the junction, I told Volkov. Find Vex, find the others. Sergeant. That's an order. The navigator fled. I stayed because Rahn had been my responsibility, because he'd been human once, and maybe some part of him still was. I was wrong. The transformation accelerated, defying every law of biology I understood. His chest split open, not bleeding, but flowering, ribs curling outward like petals to reveal organs that had been replaced by something else, something crystalline and pulsing with its own internal light. His spine extended, pushing out through his back, adding segments that clicked together with mechanical precision. Does it hurt? I asked, my weapon trained on him, but my finger frozen on the trigger. Hurt? Rahn's voice had changed, acquiring harmonics that made my teeth ache. Pain is data, Sergeant. The flesh's way of communicating with the mind, and my flesh is screaming with joy. It's telling me secrets, the geometry of ascension, the mathematics of apotheosis. His face split down the middle, pulling apart like a flower blooming. Where his human eye had been, 3 new eyes emerged, each one a different color, each one tracking me independently. His augmented eye remained, but it had been absorbed into the new flesh, becoming a component in something larger. I can see you now, he said, and somehow his voice still emerged despite his mouth existing in multiple places at once. Not just your physical form. I see your fear, your doubt, that thing you did on Vrax that still wakes you screaming. I see your daughter, Sergeant, the one who died on Cadia, the one you couldn't save. My finger tightened on the trigger. She's here, you know, Rahn continued, his body continuing to unfold, to expand, to become something that barely fit in the corridor anymore. In the warp, all the dead are there, swirling in the great ocean of souls. I could show her to you. I could let you speak with her. Would you like that? Would you like to tell her you're sorry? Shut up, I whispered. She forgives you, Kaine. My name from his lips felt like violation. She understands that you had to choose between her and the mission, that you made the right tactical decision, that watching her burn in that collapsed hab block while you held the line was the only option. But wouldn't you like to hear her say it? Wouldn't you like to hold her one more time? I fired. The last bolt took him in the center mass, where his human heart had been. The superheated beam punched through crystalline flesh that shattered into fragments, each piece catching the purple emergency lighting and scattering it into rainbow fractals. Rahn staggered backward, looking down at the wound with what seemed like disappointment. I thought you'd understand, he said sadly. I thought you of all people would see the gift we're offering. Release from duty. Release from pain. Release from the crushing weight of serving a corpse god who never cared about any of us. I fired again, and again, pumping lasbolts into the thing that had been my comrade, watching him come apart piece by piece. His augmented parts shattered. His transformed flesh burst and sizzled. He fell to his knees, then to his face, his body smoking and twitching. But he didn't die. His mouth multiplied across his ruined form, continued speaking. His eyes, scattered like marbles where the shots had blown them free, continued watching me. His mechadendrites, severed and scattered, continued twitching with independent life. You can't kill us, all his mouths said in unison. We're already beyond death. We're in the spaces between. We're in the skin of the ship. We're in the breath of the ventilation systems. We're in the light from the emergency panels. And soon, Sergeant, we'll be in you. I ran. Behind me, Ran's laughter echoed through the corridor, a sound that came from more throats than he should possess. Around me, the ship's membrane-covered walls pulsed faster, as if excited by the violence. And ahead of me, somewhere in this labyrinth of transformed metal and impossible geometry, my team was dying. The Vox crackled to life. "Sergeant!" Cross's voice, desperate. "We've reached the bridge, but throne above, you need to see this. You need to see what they did, what they were trying to do." "On my way," I gasped, my lungs burning. "What's your situation?" We found the captain's final logs, all of them. Kaine, this wasn't an accident. The Gellar Field didn't fail. They sabotaged it. The entire command staff. They wanted this to happen. They were conducting rituals, summoning something. And I think, Emperor, forgive me, I think it worked. I rounded another corner, and there was Volkov, leaning against a wall, his third eye weeping blood. He pointed down an adjacent corridor without speaking. In the distance, I could see the bridge's blast doors, and Cross's team silhouetted against the light beyond. And behind Cross, through the bridge's massive viewport designed to display the majesty of the void, I saw space itself. It was wrong. The stars weren't stars anymore. They pulsed with colors that shouldn't exist, that my eyes tried to reject but couldn't. The black of space had developed texture, depth, as if the void itself had gained dimensionality. And moving through that impossible space, things, vast things. Things so large that worlds would be dust motes in comparison. Things that noticed us noticing them. "The ship," I breathed, understanding finally flooding through me with the chill of absolute certainty. The ship was never in real space anymore. Cross turned to face me, and in the colorful light streaming through the viewport, I saw that he was crying. "For 3 months," he said, his voice breaking, "they've been sailing through the warp. No Gellar Field, no protection, just open to it, letting it in, letting it change them, change everything." On the Vox, beneath the static, the whispers were louder now. Not random, not interference. Voices. Hundreds of voices, thousands, all speaking in unison, all saying the same thing over and over, in a language I didn't know but somehow understood. "Welcome home. Welcome home. Welcome home." The hour marker in my helmet display flickered and died. Time, I realized, had stopped being a meaningful concept. We weren't bound by its rules anymore. We'd left those rules behind when we crossed the threshold, when we'd boarded a ship that hadn't been a ship for months, when we'd walked willingly into a place where reality itself had learned to scream. And somewhere in the transformed corridors behind us, Ran's many voices were still laughing, still teaching, still offering revelations that would drive us mad to comprehend. Hour 12, halfway through our 24-hour mission. We'd already lost everything. We just didn't know it yet. Chapter 3. Hour 12 to 18. The corruption. The bridge wasn't a bridge anymore. Oh, the command throne was still there, and the tactical displays, and all the Gothic architecture that declared this a vessel of the Imperial Navy. But the space itself had become negotiable. I watched Cross walk towards the navigation console, taking perhaps 10 steps across what should have been a 5-meter distance. The floor stretched beneath his boots like taffy, extending and contracting with each footfall. "Don't look at it," Volkov said, his third eye squeezed shut now, wrapped in blood-soaked bandages. "The geometry. Don't try to make sense of it. Your mind will break, trying to reconcile what you see with what should be. Too late for that. I'd already seen too much. The corridors we'd fled through to reach the bridge had been actively transforming around us. One passage had extended while we ran through it, stretching longer and longer until it felt like we'd been running for hours without reaching the end. Then suddenly it had contracted, snapping us forward like a slingshot, depositing us at our destination with bone-jarring impact. Another corridor had looped. I'd seen my own back ahead of me, watched myself running, until I realized I was chasing my own future self through a space that had folded time into a circle. And the gravity, Emperor's mercy, the gravity. It came and went like breathing now. One moment we'd be walking normally, the next we'd be floating, our mag boots useless because down had ceased to be a fixed concept. Sometimes gravity pulled sideways. Sometimes it pulled in multiple directions at once, trying to tear us apart like a wishbone. "Mara," I called out, spotting our demolitions expert crouched near the weapons station. "Cross, status report." Mara looked up, and for a moment her face was wrong, not corrupted like Ran had been, but flickering, as if I was seeing her across multiple timelines simultaneously. Young Mara, new to the Guard. Current Mara, scarred from Vrax. Old Mara, a version that had never been and never would be. All existing in the same space. "I'm seeing things, Sarge," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Home. My parents' agri-stead on Validia. I can smell the grain harvest, hear my mother singing. But she died 30 years ago in the Orc raids. It's not real," I told her, told myself, told all of us. "Whatever this place is showing you, it's using your memories against you. Don't trust anything." "But what if it is real?" Cross moved to the captain's throne, where the final logs were still displayed on the data slate. "What if this isn't corruption? What if it's revelation? What if the warp is simply a place we've been taught to fear because the truth of it would shatter the Imperium's control?" I grabbed his shoulder, hard. "That's the corruption talking. You hear yourself? You sound like a heretic." "Do I?" He met my eyes and his pupils were dilated, black pools reflecting strange light. "Or do I sound like someone who's finally asking the questions we've been forbidden to ask? Why does the Emperor demand faith without understanding? Why is knowledge restricted? Why do we burn psychers for the crime of being born different?" "Because the warp corrupts," I said. "Because this is what happens when you open your mind to it. Because..." A child's laughter cut through my words. I knew that laugh. I'd heard it every night in my dreams for 3 years. "Daddy?" She stood by the viewport, silhouetted against the impossible colors of twisted space. 7 years old, wearing the blue dress her mother had made, the one she'd been wearing when the hive block collapsed. When I'd had to choose between holding the artillery position and saving one child. When I'd made the tactical choice, the right choice, the choice that haunted every moment since. "Kira," I whispered, my laser gun dropping to my side. She turned and she was perfect, exactly as I remembered. Brown hair in pigtails, gap-toothed smile, eyes that saw the good in everything, even in a galaxy designed to crush hope. "I've missed you, Daddy," she said, walking toward me. And I knew this wasn't real. But she moved like Kira. She tilted her head like Kira did when she was thinking. She had that little scar on her chin from when she'd fallen learning to ride the mechanical pony. "You're not her," I said, but my voice cracked. "She's dead. I watched her die." "You watched me burn," Kira said. And there was no accusation in her voice, just statement of fact. "The fire came so fast, Daddy. One moment I was hiding in the apartment like you told me. The next everything was hot and bright and I couldn't breathe. I called for you. Did you hear me calling? Stop it. My hands were shaking. Stop using her voice. But it is her voice, something said from behind Kira. The thing that had been Ran shambled into view, his body now more machine than flesh, more warp than machine. All the dead echo in the Immaterium, Sergeant. Their memories, their feelings, their love. Your daughter's soul has been circling in the warp for 3 years, calling for her father. We merely gave her form, gave her voice. Don't you want to hold her? Kira reached out her arms. Please, Daddy. It's cold here. It's so cold without you. I raised my laser gun with trembling hands, aiming at the thing wearing my daughter's face. Do you see now? Ran's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. The cruelty of your Imperium. A father forced to point a weapon at his child, even in echo form, because he's been programmed to fear knowledge, to fear truth, to fear comfort. This isn't comfort, I said through gritted teeth. This is torture. Is it? Or is it mercy? We can reunite you, Kaine Valerius. Truly reunite you. One small step into the warp, and you'll be with her forever. No more guilt, no more duty, no more serving a corpse on a throne. Just you and your daughter, together in eternity. Kira smiled. We could play games again. Remember how we used to play soldiers? You'd let me win even though you were so much bigger. I knew you were letting me win, but I didn't mind, because it meant you loved me. My finger hovered over the trigger. How do you know that? How do you know about the games? Because I told them, Kira said, and for just an instant, her eyes were completely lucid, completely real. When I died, Daddy, I went somewhere, and things there asked about you, asked about everything. They were so interested in you, in the man who could choose duty over love. They think you're special. I didn't fire, I couldn't. Instead, I lowered the weapon and turned away. She's not real, I told myself, and the words felt like self-mutilation. She's not real. She's not real. Behind me, Kira began to cry, and it sounded exactly like she had the night before I'd deployed, when she'd begged me not to go. They came for us then, properly. Not shambling corrupted remnants, but the crew of the Eternal Providence, transformed and purposeful. They emerged from every doorway, every corridor, every impossible angle where space had folded back on itself. Dozens of them. Hundreds. The entire 5,000-person complement of a lunar-class cruiser, all changed but not mindless. That was the worst part. They weren't mindless. They moved with tactical precision. They flanked. They coordinated. They used the ship's bizarre geometry against us. And they spoke, every one of them, in voices that were almost human. Brother, one said to Cross. And it had been human once. A Navy lieutenant by the rank insignia, still visible on its transformed uniform. Brother of Mars, you served aboard the Victorious during the Sabbath Crusade. I served on her sister ship. We're brothers in service. Why do we fight? Because you're corrupted, Cross snarled, firing his laser gun. The bolt took the thing in the shoulder, burning through flesh that had become crystalline. It staggered but kept coming. Corrupted. It laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. We're liberated. The Gellar Field was a prison, brother. It kept us locked in the material realm, blind to the greater reality. Captain Telvan understood. He studied forbidden texts. He learned the truth. And he freed us. More emerged. A tech priest whose mechadendrites had become living things, speaking in binary cant that made the air vibrate. A ratings officer whose body had multiplied, splitting into 3 identical forms that moved in perfect synchronization. A stormtrooper whose armor had fused with his flesh, creating something between warrior and machine that neither humanity nor the Mechanicus had ever conceived. And they weren't attacking. Not yet. They were offering. Specialist Chen, one said, focusing on Mara. It had been a woman once, beautiful even now in its transformed state, with skin that had become mirror bright. We know what you lost on Vrax. We know about the 147 days in the trenches, the gas attacks, the flesh-eating diseases, the slow death of everyone you cared about while you survived, again and again, wondering why you deserved to live when they deserved it more. Mara's weapon wavered. How? We know everything here, the transformed woman said gently. The warp contains all memories, all pain, all guilt. And we can take it away. We can show you your squad again. They're here, in the spaces between, waiting for you, wondering why you haven't joined them. Don't listen, I shouted, firing at the mirror woman. My last bolt reflected off her skin, scattering into a dozen beams that scorch marks across the ceiling. Sergeant Cross, another creature said, this one having been the ship's first officer. I recognized the command insignia. You're dying. The cancer in your lungs. The medical servitors found it 6 months ago, gave you 2 years. You've told no one, continued serving, knowing every day brings you closer to drowning in your own blood. We can fix that. The warp can remake flesh, can give you centuries more. Centuries to continue serving. Isn't that what you want? Cross's face went pale. I didn't tell anyone. You didn't have to, the first officer said. We see everything. We are everything. The crew of this ship has become one consciousness, one purpose, and we're inviting you to join us, to become part of something greater than service, greater than duty, greater than the Imperium's lies. They advanced, slowly, speaking continuously, each one targeting our fears, our desires, our secret shames. And then I saw Mara's hand drop. Mara, no! I lunged for her, but Volkov grabbed me. It's too late, the navigator whispered. I can see her soul. It's already reaching out, already accepting. Mara walked forward, toward the transformed crew, her expression one of wonder. They're showing me, she said dreamily. Showing me my squad. They're not dead. They're just elsewhere, waiting. And I can be with them. I can be with them. Mara, they're lying, Cross shouted. It's corruption, it's beautiful, Mara breathed. Why didn't anyone tell us? Why did they keep this from us? All this time we've been fighting the warp, but it's not evil. It's just different. It's truth without the filters. It's sensation without the limitations. The transformation began. Not violent, not painful. She smiled as her flesh began to shift, as colors bled into her skin like watercolors on canvas. Her eyes multiplied, spreading across her face in a pattern that was almost artistic. Her bones elongated gracefully, giving her height and presence. And through it all, she laughed with pure joy. I can feel them, she said, her voice acquiring harmonics that made my ears ache. My squad. They're here. They're touching me. They never left. We've all been here together. I just couldn't perceive it before. Oh, Sergeant. Oh, Kaine. You should accept. You should feel this. It's like coming home after a lifetime of being lost. She reached for me, and I saw that her hands had become beautiful. Terrible and beautiful, with fingers that had too many joints, that ended in points of crystalline matter that caught the light and fractured it into impossible colors. Mara, I said, my weapon raised but my aim uncertain. Fight it. You're still in there. You can still what? She tilted her head, and the movement was graceful, inhuman. Still suffer, still endure, still pretend that life in the Imperium is anything but slow death punctuated by moments of terror. They've shown me the truth, Kaine. The Emperor is dead, has been dead for 10,000 years. We've been serving a corpse, dying for a lie. But here, she gestured to the transformed crew around her. Here we serve truth. Here we serve sensation. Here we serve ourselves. The creature that had been Specialist Mara Chen smiled at me with too many mouths. "Come with me," she said, and meant it. Genuinely wanted me to experience what she was experiencing. That was the horror of it. Not that she'd been corrupted against her will, but that she'd been given a choice and had chosen this. Had looked at transformation and damnation and had said yes with full awareness. "Come with me," she repeated, "and I'll show you your daughter. Not the echo, the real her. She's here, Kaine. Kira is here. Don't you want to hold her one more time?" I fired. The last bolt took her in the chest, exactly where I'd been trained to shoot. Center mass, maximum stopping power. The shot that had ended 100 enemies in 100 battles. Mara staggered back, looking down at the wound with surprise more than pain. Black blood welled up, but it didn't pour. It floated, defying gravity, forming shapes in the air, symbols, language. Messages I couldn't read but somehow understood meant welcome and transformation and inevitable. She smiled at me. "That's okay," she said gently. "You'll understand eventually. Everyone does. Everyone will." Then she turned and walked away, joining the crew, becoming part of the mass of transformed humanity that filled the bridge. They accepted her without ceremony, their flesh flowing together, touching, merging, becoming something singular and plural at once. And through it all, Mara was smiling. "We have to move." Cross pulled me backward, firing his lasgun into the crowd. The shots hit, burned, damaged, but the crew didn't stop, didn't flee. They just kept coming, kept speaking, kept offering. We fled the bridge, Volkov leading us through corridors that shifted and changed. The navigator's third eye was open now despite the pain, using his warp sight to find paths through the impossible geometry. "Escape pods," Cross gasped. He was limping badly, one leg dragging. "Starboard bay, we can..." A piece of the wall lunged at him. Not detached and fell. Lunged. The membrane-covered surface had grown teeth, and they sank into Cross's side, tearing through armor and flesh. He screamed, firing his weapon point-blank into the wall. The teeth released him, but I saw the damage. Saw the black ichor now mixing with his blood. "I'm infected," he said calmly, too calmly. "Direct contact. I can feel it already. Feel it whispering. We'll get you to the medbay." "There is no medbay anymore, Kaine. Look around. This entire ship has become one organism, one consciousness." He pressed his hand to the wound, and I saw his flesh already beginning to change. And now I'm part of it. We dragged him anyway, Volkov and I, each taking an arm, hauling him through corridors that seemed to actively resist our passage. Behind us, the crew followed at a leisurely pace. They didn't need to rush. They knew we had nowhere to go. My charge pack read 30%. Volkov's was down to 15. We'd been firing constantly, and every shot felt like borrowed time. The escape pod bay doors loomed ahead, still intact, still Imperial. For a moment I allowed myself hope. We keyed the access panel. The doors split open. And inside, I saw what they'd done to the pods. Every single one had been sabotaged, not destroyed. That would have been a mercy. They'd been transformed. The metal shells had become organic, pulsing with that same membrane tissue. The interior capsules had been filled with that clear fluid. And floating in each pod, suspended in the liquid, were crew members. Not dead, not transformed. Somewhere in between, eyes open and aware, watching us with expressions that could have been torment or ecstasy. The pods had been sabotaged, I said numbly. All of them. Behind us, Cross began to laugh. I turned to see him standing on his own now, his wound having sealed itself with flesh that wasn't his own. His eyes had started to change color, to multiply. Sabotaged, he said, and his voice had acquired that multitonal quality. Or improved. Those crew members in the pods aren't dead, Kaine. They're becoming, gestating, growing into something more than they were. And soon, he smiled, and I saw too many teeth. Soon I'll join them. It doesn't hurt. I promise it doesn't hurt. He reached for me with hands that had begun to sprout too many fingers. Please, Cross said, and part of him was still human, still my comrade. Please don't let me finish. Kill me now, while I can still ask, while I still know what I'm asking. I looked at Volkov. The navigator nodded once, then turned away. I raised my laser gun, aiming at the head of a man I'd served with for 5 years. A man who'd saved my life on Armageddon. A man who deserved better than this. Thank you, Cross said, his eyes now fully changed, but his voice still his own. For the Emperor, I whispered, and fired. The last bolt vaporized his head, the superheated beam reducing skull and brain to ash in an instant. His body collapsed, twitching, the corruption still trying to rebuild him even in death. I fired again, and again, until nothing remained that could be transformed, until nothing remained at all. The crew emerged from the corridor behind us, filling the pod bay, surrounding us. They didn't attack. They just watched, their 1,000 eyes all fixed on us with something like pity. There's nowhere left to run, Mara's voice said from somewhere in the mass. No escape pods, no salvation, only transformation, only truth. Why do you still resist? I checked my charge pack. 20%. Volkov's third eye was bleeding freely now, the strain of navigating this impossible space breaking his enhanced physiology. I can't see a way out, he whispered. All paths lead to them. All paths lead to changing. Then we make a new path, I said, and turned toward the center of the ship, toward engineering, toward the source of all this, toward the broken Gellar Field that had let the warp in. Hour 18. 6 hours left until our extraction window closed. 6 hours to do the impossible. 6 hours to save a ship that didn't want to be saved. Chapter 4. Hour 18 to 23. The bargain. The ship was alive and it was hunting us, not with teeth or claws or the corrupted crew that filled its corridors. The Eternal Providence itself had become predator, and we were prey moving through the belly of something vast and patient and hungry. Volkov and I ran through passages that closed behind us, that opened ahead of us, that steered us like blood cells through veins toward a destination we hadn't chosen. Every turn I tried to make led back to the path the ship wanted us on. Every hatch I attempted to seal opened itself moments later. The ship's will was absolute within its own body. Command, this is boarding team Alpha. I gasped into the Vox, knowing it was futile, but unable to stop trying. We have experienced total mission failure. Repeat, total failure. Ship is compromised by warp contamination. Request immediate extraction and subsequent orbital bombardment of target vessel. Static answered. But beneath it, I heard breathing. The ship's breathing. The rhythmic pulse that matched the membrane-covered walls, that synchronized with my own heartbeat until I couldn't tell where I ended and it began. They can't hear you, Volkov said, his voice thin with exhaustion. His third eye had closed again, the strain of keeping it open having caused blood vessels to rupture across half his face. We're not broadcasting on normal Vox frequencies anymore. We're too deep, too changed. The ship has pulled us into itself, and normal communication doesn't reach here. Here, I demanded. Where is here? Everywhere, he said. Nowhere. We're in the spaces between real space and the warp, the liminal void. The place where the Gellar Field should prevent existence but now enables it. I tried the Vox again, cycling through every frequency. Imperial channels, emergency bands, even forbidden wavelengths reserved for inquisitorial use. Nothing. Just static and breathing, and underneath it all, whispering. Kaine, the ship whispered, not through speakers or Vox, but directly into my mind. The voice was gentle, feminine. It reminded me of my wife, dead these 15 years from the same orc raids that took Mara's parents. Why do you struggle? Why do you fight what's inevitable? Get out of my head, I snarled, but even I could hear the weakness in my voice. I'm not in your head, Kaine. I'm offering you a doorway, a way out of the prison you've been living in. All your life you've served, obeyed, fought wars you didn't start for causes you don't understand, watched everyone you loved die while you survived, again and again, wondering why. I can show you why. I can give you purpose beyond mere survival. I tried to focus on the catechisms, the prayers drilled into me at the scholar. The Emperor protects, the Emperor provides, my life for the Imperium, my death for the Emperor. The words felt hollow here, like sounds without meaning, like comfort without substance. How could the Emperor protect when he'd been dead for 10,000 years? How could he provide when trillions suffered in his name? How could my death matter when it would be one among billions, forgotten before my body cooled? You see it now, the ship whispered, the truth you've always known but never admitted. The Emperor is a corpse sustained by sacrifice. The Imperium is a rotting edifice held together by lies and blood. You've given everything to serve it, and what has it given you? A daughter burned alive, a wife murdered, brothers in arms transformed or killed, loneliness and duty and a death that will mean nothing. Stop, I said, but I didn't scream it. Couldn't scream it. I can give you more. I can show you your daughter. Not an echo, not a memory. The actual soul fragment of Kira Valerius, preserved in the warp, waiting for her father. I can reunite you. All you have to do is accept. All you have to do is stop fighting. Volkov grabbed my arm. Don't listen. It's showing you desires to break your will. It's showing me the truth, I said quietly. That's what makes it worse. If it was just lies, I could resist. But some of what it's saying is true. The Emperor is dead. The Imperium is corrupt. We do die for nothing. We die for humanity, Volkov insisted. For the species, for the future. What future? I looked at him. This navigator whose third eye let him see impossible things. You've seen the warp. You know what's coming. The great rift opening. The demon incursions increasing. The slow death of everything. What future are we preserving? Another 10,000 years of suffering. Volkov had no answer. Because there was no answer. There was only duty, and even that was starting to feel like delusion. Come to me, the ship whispered. Come to engineering, to the core. I'll show you everything. And then you can choose. Choose what? Whether to save a species that has already damned itself. We walked deeper because there was nowhere else to go. The corridors had become something beyond description. The walls weren't walls anymore. They were membranes separating us from something vast. I could see shapes moving beyond them. Massive things. Things that shouldn't fit inside a ship's hull but somehow did, existing in dimensions that my mind refused to properly process. And then it spoke. Not the ship. Something larger. Something that the ship was merely a fragment of. a single cell in a body too large to comprehend. Kaine Valerius, it said, and the sound came from everywhere and nowhere, vibrating through my bones, resonating in my skull. I know you. The corridor ahead split open like a mouth, revealing a chamber that couldn't exist. It was too large, extending in directions that weren't up or down, or any standard spatial relationship. And at its center, something moved. I'd seen Xenos horrors. I'd fought orcs and tyranids. I'd watched a planetary governor possessed by a demon on Thracia Prime. But this was different. This was order and chaos unified. This was intelligence and madness merged into purpose. It was beautiful and terrible and wrong in ways that made my enhanced combat conditioning. The psychological barriers meant to prevent panic. Scream warnings that I couldn't hear anymore because I was already inside the warning, already part of what I should be fleeing from. I have watched you since Cadia, it said. Watched you choose duty over love. Watched you hold the line while your daughter burned. Watched you become the perfect Imperial soldier, empty of doubt, full of faith, and yet... The entity paused, and I felt it examining me with senses beyond sight. Yet now, at the end, your faith wavers. Why? Because, I said, my voice barely audible, because I've seen what faith creates, seen what it costs, and I don't know if the price was worth it. Honesty. How refreshing. The entity moved closer, and I realized it wasn't separate from the ship. It was the ship, and the ship was part of it. And the distinction didn't matter, because in this place, boundaries were suggestions. Your Imperium demands faith without understanding, obedience without question, sacrifice without purpose. I offer something different. Corruption, I said. Damnation. Knowledge, it corrected. Truth. The Imperium has lied to you, Kaine Valerius, about the nature of the warp, about the Emperor's origins, about what humanity could become if freed from the shackles of ignorance. I don't want to know, I said. But even as I spoke the words, I knew they were false. Yes, you do. You've always wanted to know. Why else would you question? Why else would you doubt? The entity showed me things then. Not visions or illusions, but memories. Historical records pulled from the ship's data cores, from the warp itself, from the collective unconscious of humanity. I saw the Emperor before he was the Emperor, saw the perpetual who had walked through human history, guiding and manipulating, saw the unification wars not as glorious crusade, but as brutal conquest, saw the great crusade's lies, worlds brought to compliance through genocide, cultures erased, knowledge destroyed in the name of the imperial truth. And I saw the Horus heresy from both sides, saw the reasons for the betrayal, the corruption, yes, but also the genuine grievances, the legitimate concerns that had been ignored until they festered into rebellion. Your Emperor created weapons and called them sons, the entity said. He built an empire on lies and called it truth. He demanded worship while denying divinity. And when it all collapsed, he blamed chaos for humanity's flaws. But chaos didn't corrupt humanity, Kaine. Chaos is humanity. The warp is simply a mirror reflecting what you are. No, I said. But the word had no force. Yes, every daemon is born from human emotion. Every corruption springs from human desire. We are not your enemy. We are your truth, the part of yourself you've been taught to fear and suppress. The truth, I laughed, and it came out broken. The truth is that you're showing me these things to break me, to make me accept corruption by making me doubt everything I believe. And if your beliefs are built on lies, is ignorance truly better than damnation? That question hit harder than any weapon. Because I didn't have an answer, couldn't have an answer. Because if I said yes, I admitted that faith required delusion. And if I said no, I accepted that truth might justify any cost. Some truths shouldn't be known, I finally said. Spoken like a true slave, the entity said, but without malice, with something almost like pity. You've been so well trained, so perfectly conditioned. Even now, confronted with evidence of the Imperium's lies, you choose comfortable ignorance over uncomfortable knowledge. I choose humanity, I said. Whatever its flaws, whatever its lies, I choose my species over your transformation. Your species is already transforming, with or without me, with or without you. Humanity is psychically evolving. In 10,000 years, perhaps fewer, every human will be a psyker, and the Imperium's response: death, suppression, fear. They're trying to stop evolution itself. I offer a different path: guided transformation, controlled ascension. By turning us into what I saw on the bridge, into Mara. Mara Chen is happy, truly happy for the first time since Vrax. Is that not worth something? And there it was, the core of the temptation. Not power or knowledge, but simple happiness. The absence of suffering, the end of duty without purpose. At the cost of her humanity, I said. Define humanity, the entity challenged. Is it the flesh, the form, or is it something more? Mara Chen still thinks, still feels, still loves. She's simply expanded beyond the limitations of her original form. Is that not what humanity has always done? Evolved, adapted, transcended? I had no answer, because somewhere in the philosophical maze, I'd gotten lost. We reached engineering through corridors that were no longer corridors, but arteries, moving through the ship's body toward its heart. Every step took us deeper into nightmare, but the nightmares had begun to feel less like horror and more like inevitability. We passed crew members, the ones I'd killed earlier. Ran with his crystalline organs, Cross with his multiplied eyes, even Vex, his body now a beautiful horror of too many limbs arranged in perfect symmetry. They didn't attack. They watched us pass with expressions that might have been pity. You're still fighting, Ran said gently, still clinging to the Imperial lies. It's painful to watch, Sergeant, like seeing a man desperately clutching a burning log because he's afraid of the dark. The dark has teeth, I said. Only if you perceive it as separate from yourself, Vex replied, his multiple voices creating harmonies. But we're all part of the same thing, Kaine. You, me, the Emperor, the Chaos Gods, all fragments of the same universal consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. That's madness, Volkov said, speaking for the first time in what felt like hours. Is it? Cross tilted his head, the movement graceful despite his transformed state. Or is it simply a larger perspective? Your navigator's third eye lets him see the warp. Our transformation lets us understand it. To live in harmony with it, rather than constant war. They let us pass, didn't try to stop us, didn't need to. Because somewhere along the way, I'd started to wonder if they were right. The prayers I'd been reciting, the Emperor protects, the Emperor provides, felt like mantras from a cargo cult. Words without meaning, repeated because repetition itself was comforting, not because the words held truth. My charge pack read 5%. I'd fired perhaps 3 rounds in the last hour. Hadn't needed to, because nothing was attacking anymore. The ship had moved beyond violence into something else, into invitation. How much farther? I asked Volkov. We're here, he said, and the navigator was weeping. Not from fear, from something else. Emperor, forgive me. We're here and it's beautiful. The engineering bay opened before us, and I saw the Gellar Field generator, or what it had become. The massive machine that should have protected the ship from the warp had been transformed into something organic. Cables had become nerve clusters. Plasma coils had become organs. And at its center, growing from the generator itself like a tumor or a flower depending on how you looked at it, was something massive. A heart, a brain, a womb, all of these and none of these. The core, the entity said, where real space and the warp merge, where I was born. You, I breathed. The generator created you. The generator's failure created an opening. The crew's rituals invited me through. Their faith gave me form. I am not chaos, Kaine Valerius. I am synthesis, the union of material and immaterial, the next stage of existence. I approached the generator, and I could feel its pull, not physical, metaphysical. It wanted me, needed me, because I was the last holdout, the last piece of resistance. And if I fell, if I accepted, then the ship would be complete. But I could also see the activation controls, buried in the organic mass, still functional, still capable of restarting the Gellar Field, of forcing the ship back into pure real space, of ending this. You could activate it, the entity said, reading my thoughts. Force me back into the warp. Save the Imperium from what I represent, but the cost. What cost? I demanded. The generator requires power, immense power, power that no longer flows through this ship's systems. But there is another source. Human consciousness is energy. A soul can power the generator long enough to force real space reimposition. A soul, I repeated. My soul. Yes, you could save this ship, drive me back, return the Eternal Providence to the Imperium. All it would cost is everything you are. Your consciousness would be consumed, burned as fuel. There would be no afterlife, no echo in the warp, just oblivion. Hour 23 ticked over on my chronometer. 1 hour left until extraction window closed. 1 hour to make an impossible choice. I could activate the generator, save the ship, damn myself to absolute death. Or I could accept, join the crew, be reunited with Kira, with everyone I'd lost, become part of something larger, even if that something was corruption. Behind me, Volkov waited. His third eye was open again, and I knew he was seeing both possible futures, both outcomes, and I knew that whichever I chose, he would follow. The price, I said slowly, was myself. Yes, the entity confirmed, but is that not what the Imperium has always demanded? Yourself, your choice, your life. At least here, the sacrifice would have meaning, would be witnessed, appreciated. I looked at the generator, at the pulsing organic mass that had once been pure machine, at the controls half buried in flesh. I looked at the transformed crew, watching me with their 1,000 eyes. I looked at Volkov, my last living companion, waiting for me to decide his fate along with mine. And I reached for the activation panel. Chapter 5, Hour 23 to 24, The Awakening. My hand hovered over the activation panel, flesh meeting corrupted metal, and in that instant of contact I understood everything. The generator didn't need my soul as fuel. It needed my choice, my willing sacrifice, because that's what held power in the warp, intent, conviction, the crystallized moment of a decision made with absolute certainty. The entity had told me the truth, but not all of it. Typical of the warp, half-truths wrapped in honesty, more dangerous than any lie. Daddy? I turned, and Kira stood there. Not the apparition from before, not the echo shaped by the ship's will. Something else. Something that made my enhanced combat training scream warnings, while my heart broke all over again. She was translucent, barely visible, a shimmer in the air like heat distortion. But her eyes, Emperor's mercy, her eyes were real, were her. "I don't have long," she said, and her voice came from far away as if she was speaking across a vast distance. "The warp is receding. Your choice is pulling everything back, but I need you to know. I need you to understand before you do this." "You're not real," I whispered, but without conviction. "I'm as real as anything in the warp can be," Kira said, and she sounded older somehow, wiser, as if 3 years circling in the immaterium had taught her things no 7-year-old should know. "When I died, Daddy, my soul went into the warp like everyone's does. Most dissolve, most become part of the great ocean, but some linger, some hold on." "Why?" The word came out broken. "Because of love," she said simply. "Your love. It was so strong, so absolute that it anchored a fragment of me here, kept me from dissolving. The entity used me, yes, but I was always really here, really waiting." My hand trembled on the panel. "Then I can't do this. If I activate it, if I die." "I'll finally be free," Kira interrupted gently. "Daddy, I've been trapped, caught between life and dissolution, held in place by your guilt and love and grief. You need to let me go. You need to let yourself go." Tears ran down my face, mixing with the sweat and blood. "I failed you once. I can't." "You didn't fail me." She moved closer, and I felt cold where her presence touched. "You made the right choice, the tactical choice, one life against hundreds. I understood, even as I burned. I was proud of you." "You were 7 years old," I sobbed. "You shouldn't have had to understand." "I was your daughter," she said. "I understood duty because you taught me, and now I'm teaching you something. There's a difference between surviving and living. You've been surviving, Daddy, punishing yourself, but it's time to live, even if living means dying." Behind me, Volkov made a sound. I glanced back to see him staring at Kira, his third eye wide and weeping. "He sees me," Kira said. "Navigators can perceive warp stuff. He knows I'm real. Ask him." "She's a soul fragment," Volkov confirmed, his voice thick. "Stable, genuine. I've seen demon deceptions. This isn't that. This is actually her." I looked back at my daughter, at the ghost of my daughter, the echo, the precious fragment that had survived against all probability. "I don't want to say goodbye again." "I know," Kira said, and she was crying too, translucent tears that dissipated before reaching the ground. "But goodbyes are just love with nowhere else to go. And Daddy, I love you. I always loved you. Even when you had to choose the mission, even when you couldn't save me. I loved you." "I love you too," I whispered. "Emperor, help me. I love you too." "Then let me go," she said. "Activate it. Save the ship. Save Volkov. Save whoever comes next. And know that I'll be waiting on the other side, not in the warp, somewhere else, somewhere better. The Emperor protects, Daddy. Maybe not the way we thought, but he does." She was fading now, already receding as I pressed harder on the panel as my will crystallized into action. "Goodbye, Kira," I said. "Goodbye, Daddy," she whispered. "Be brave." And then she was gone. I slammed my fist into the activation control. The generator roared to life with a sound that transcended noise, becoming something felt in bones and teeth and the base of the spine. Not the smooth hum of a functioning Gellar Field, but the tortured scream of a machine forced to operate beyond its design parameters, powered by something it was never meant to consume. My life force, my consciousness. Everything I was converted into pure energy. The pain hit immediately. Not burning, worse than burning. It felt like my cells were being torn apart at the molecular level, each atom separated and consumed. My flesh began to blacken, not with fire but with dissolution, as if I was being erased from reality starting at my hands. But I kept my palm pressed to the panel, kept my will focused, kept feeding myself into the machine. The generator's core blazed with light that hurt to perceive, colors that existed outside normal spectrum, and I realized I could see the Gellar Field forming, could watch it expand outward through the ship, like a bubble of real space forcing back the warp's intrusion. The ship screamed, not through speakers or vox, but directly into my fragmenting mind. A howl of rage and loss and something almost like grief as the warp was driven back, as the careful synthesis of material and immaterial was torn apart. The energy that would be absorbed, that would be absorbed. The field hit the crew first. I watched through eyes that were simultaneously dissolving and expanding, perceiving in spectrums beyond human as the corrupted crew members thrashed. Their transformed flesh convulsed, trying to recede, trying to revert, but the changes had gone too deep. The warp retreated, but left its marks permanently inscribed in meat and bone. Mara fell to her knees, screaming with too many mouths as her crystalline organs tried to become flesh again but couldn't, trapped in a state between transformation and humanity. Ran's mechadendrites went rigid, his augmented parts warring with his corrupted biology, creating feedback loops that would eventually shut down his consciousness entirely. They wouldn't die. That would have been mercy. They would remain as they were, locked in their transformed states, but cut off from the warp's sustaining influence. Aware, suffering, forever changed. The organic membrane coating the walls began to shrivel, pulling back from the adamantium like skin peeling away, but the metal beneath had been altered at a fundamental level. The ship would never be clean again, never be pure. The contamination was permanent, written into its structure. My vision was fragmenting now, splitting into multiple perspectives. I could see myself from outside, a burning figure locked in communion with a screaming machine, could see Volkov backing away in horror, could see the ship lurching, folding back into real space with the violence of forced transition. And through it all, I kept feeding the generator, kept burning, kept dying, because Kira had been right. This was living, this meant something. The lurch hit like a physical blow as the Eternal Providence tore back into the materium. Space reasserted its normal rules with prejudice. Gravity stopped being negotiable. Time flowed linearly again. The impossible geometries snapped back into 3 dimensions, and somewhere in the ship, I heard structural supports failing, unable to maintain forms they should never have held. Through the generator's sensors, or was it my expanded consciousness, I felt the command vessel's augers lock onto us, detected the righteous endeavors approach, cautious, weapons hot, ready to obliterate us if we showed signs of corruption. I needed to warn them, needed to tell them what had happened, what they would find. My legs shouldn't have worked. The flesh below my waist had burned away to ash and bone. But I dragged myself forward anyway. Some part of me still functional despite impossibility, crawling through corridors that were returning to normal but would never be right. The Vox station, Junction 7 Delta, where this had all gone wrong. I pulled myself up, my blackened hands leaving char marks on the controls, and activated the emergency frequency. "Command," I rasped, and was shocked to find I still had a voice. "This is Sergeant Kaine Valerius, boarding team Alpha. Do not..." I coughed, tasting copper and ash. "Do not attempt to salvage this vessel. Contamination is permanent. Crew are transformed but stable. They will not revert. They cannot be saved." Static answered. Then a voice. "Boarding Team Alpha, we read you. Are there survivors?" "Define survivors," I said, and laughed, the sound coming out wet and wrong. "The ship has returned to real space. The corruption is contained, but not eliminated. Recommend immediate orbital bombardment. Target plasma drives, ensure total destruction." "Negative, Alpha. Ship is valuable Imperial asset. We're preparing boarding." "No," I cut them off. "You don't understand. This isn't standard warp taint. This is synthesis, evolution, and it's patient. It will wait, it will whisper, and eventually it will spread." My hand found the self-destruct activation panel. Security protocols demanded command-level authorization, but the ship's systems were compromised, damaged, and I was still partially connected to the generator. My dying consciousness interfaced with the machine's spirits, and they obeyed. Because even corrupted, even transformed, they recognized sacrifice. "Self-destruct activated," I reported. 30-minute countdown. Evacuate to minimum safe distance. This is my final order. Sergeant, belay that command. We can still... I terminated the connection and slumped against the bulkhead, watching my chronometer tick toward hour 24, watching the self-destruct countdown begin, watching my life end in increments. Somewhere in the ship, the crew were screaming. They understood what was coming, and part of me, the part that had served with some of them, had bled with them, felt guilt for condemning them to death. But a larger part knew this was necessary, knew that letting them live, letting the ship survive, would be worse than any individual mercy. I activated my helmet recorder one final time. If you're hearing this, then I'm already dead. My name is Sergeant Kaine Valerius, and I boarded the Eternal Providence with my team expecting a routine salvage operation. What we found was something else, something the Imperium needs to understand. My voice was failing, each word harder than the last. But I forced them out anyway. The warp isn't just chaos, it's evolution. It's humanity's psychic shadow made manifest, and it's learning, adapting, finding new ways to corrupt. This ship wasn't infected against its will. The crew chose transformation, and that's the real danger. Not violence, but seduction. Not horror, but hope. I coughed, feeling something vital tear inside. I saw my daughter, a real fragment of her soul, preserved in the warp by my love and grief. The entity used her against me, but she was real. And she forgave me, told me to let go. I don't know if that was mercy or the cruelest trick of all, but I chose to believe it was real. Because faith, real faith, not the Imperium's enforced dogma, requires choosing to believe without proof. That's what I learned here, that faith and doubt aren't opposites, they're partners. The ship shuddered. In the distance, plasma drives were spooling up, preparing for overload. 20 minutes left. If you must board vessels like this, remember, not all corruption announces itself with horns and screaming. Some of it whispers with the voice of everything you've ever wanted, shows you truth wrapped in lies, offers freedom from pain, and that's when it's all ready. I heard it, the magnetic clamps of boarding craft attaching to the hull, the rescue team, ignoring my warnings, coming anyway. No, I whispered. No. Turn back. Turn back. It's not... The Vox crackled. Boarding Team Beta to command. We have hard seal, preparing to breach. I tried to stand, to reach the Vox, to scream a warning. But my body had finally given out. I slumped forward, consciousness fading, as I heard the rescue team's voices getting closer to a ship that was about to explode, getting closer to crew members who would share their revelation, getting closer to becoming the next chapter in a nightmare that would never truly end. My last thought, as darkness took me, was of Kira, smiling, free, and I thought, maybe that was enough. Lieutenant Marcus Thorne led boarding Team Beta through the Eternal Providence's airlock with weapon raised and prayers ready. The ship was hot, the corridors wrong, but command had been clear. Recover survivors, extract data cores, secure the vessel. They found the first body in Junction 7 Delta, Sergeant Kaine Valerius, or what remained of him. The body was burned beyond recognition, blackened and twisted, but the rank insignia was still visible, still intact. Found him, Thorne reported, kneeling beside the corpse. Sergeant Valerius, deceased, appears to have activated self-destruct and... He stopped, because the corpse's eyes were open, and they were the wrong color. Not brown, not enhanced augmetic silver, but a shade of purple that seemed to shift and pulse with internal light. And the lips, charred, cracked, should have been incapable of movement, were curved upward. The corpse was smiling. Thorne stumbled backward, his weapon coming up, but it was too late. The Vox was already filling with voices, his team scattered throughout the ship, all speaking at once, all saying the same thing. Lieutenant, you need to see this. Lieutenant, there's something beautiful here. Lieutenant, they're showing us such magnificent things. Marcus Thorne looked down at the recording device clutched in the corpse's hand. Still active. Still transmitting. He reached for it. 3 months later, the Righteous Endeavor and boarding Team Beta were declared missing. Last known position at the edge of the Tertius sector. A salvage operation was authorized. After all, they were valuable Imperial assets, worth recovering. Since the Eternal Providence incident, 17 vessels have gone missing in the Tertius sector. Each time, a salvage operation is authorized. Each time, the salvage teams vanish. Each time, the contagion spreads. Sergeant Valerius's recording has been suppressed. Command fears the philosophical questions it raises more than the physical corruption it describes. They're wrong. Ideas don't kill civilizations. Ignoring warnings does. The transformed crew members weren't destroyed with the ship. They evacuated, they adapted, they're patient, and they're still whispering. I've traced the pattern. The infection isn't spreading randomly. It's being carried deliberately by survivors who appear unchanged, who pass screenings, who report for duty on new vessels and begin the cycle again. Kaine Valerius tried to warn us. We didn't listen. How many ships in the Imperial Navy are sailing with compromised crew right now? How many whisper to their brothers in the dark? How many smile with the wrong-colored eyes? The question isn't whether the corruption will spread. It's whether it already has. The void holds more than darkness. What Sergeant Valerius encountered aboard the Eternal Providence was only the beginning. In the 41st millennium, humanity faces threats that don't announce themselves with roaring and violence. They arrive as salvation, as truth, as the answer to every question you were forbidden to ask. Subscribe to Voidborn Terrors for more tales from the edges of Imperial space, where faith meets doubt and duty confronts revelation. Each story pulls back another layer of the Imperium's carefully maintained lies, revealing the cosmic horror lurking beneath 10,000 years of dogma. Remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But some battles are fought in the spaces between thought and belief. And those are the wars we've already lost. The Emperor protects, but from what and at what cost?